to attach my sock to it. I couldn't wait to get back home and start making some money on this idea. I figured I could make a killing on rainy days as a street vendor with a sock drying machine. The only problem with the hand dryer in the airport bathroom was that it was a little too powerful. My sock started smoking, and then it went flying. Splush! Right into a urinal. I decided I'd just get a new pair of socks at the resort, because there was no way I was going to wear something I had to fish out of a urinal. When I came back from the restroom, they were making an announcement at our gate. I figured they were ready to start boarding the plane, but they were just letting us know there was another delay. And it went on like that for the rest of the day. Apparently, this storm was causing problems everywhere, and the plane we were supposed to fly out on was stuck at some other airport. I was starting to worry that my electronic device was going to run out of juice while I was on the plane, so I looked for a place to charge it. But I guess everyone else was thinking the same thing. The charging station was completely packed. The only available outlet was in an awkward place, in the doorway of the women's restroom. But when your battery is at 15%, you gotta do what you gotta do. Our plane finally arrived at the gate, and all the passengers who were on it got off. But if flying is supposed to be fun, you'd never know it from the way these people looked. The gate agent got on the loudspeaker and said we'd be boarding shortly. Then she said our flight was overbooked, and they needed a few volunteers to give up their seats. She said that whoever volunteered first would get $300 and a free night at the airport hotel. I didn't need to hear another word. I got to the desk before she'd even finished with her announcement and said I was her guy. Unfortunately, Mom wouldn't let me volunteer, and nobody else stepped up either. So the gate agent increased the offer to $500, and some woman snapped it up right away. I just hope she enjoys spending my money. After that, the agent made another announcement. She said the flight crew on our plane had worked too many hours because of all the delays, and we had to wait for a replacement crew to come in before we could take off. Now everyone at our gate was mad because what was supposed to be an early flight was turning into an overnight one. When the new flight crew finally arrived, they didn't look happy to be there. That's probably because they were expecting to spend Christmas Eve at home, so I knew exactly how they felt. After the crew got on board, they started letting passengers on the plane. My family got to go first, because they let people with young kids board before anyone else. But the gate agent stopped me at the door. She said my carry-on bag was too big to fit in the overhead bin, so it had to go down below with the rest of the luggage. That was fine with me, because I didn't want to deal with my bag on the plane anyway. When I got on board, I was pretty impressed. The seats were a lot bigger than I expected, and they were covered in real leather. I asked Mom what row we were in, but she said we needed to keep moving. She said this was the first class section, and our seats were in economy. But the economy section wasn't half as nice as first class. The seats were packed together, and they barely had any cushioning. Mom said our seats were toward the middle of the plane, so we headed there. But Dad hung back in the first class section. He said he got upgraded because of all his frequent flyer miles, and that he'd catch up with us after we landed. Mom didn't seem happy about this news. She said it wasn't fair for him to be in first class while we were in economy, so she said we'd all take turns sitting in Dad's seat during the flight. But Dad said the rest of us weren't experienced travelers like him, and we wouldn't even know how to act in first class. Luckily, there were other passengers trying to board, so Mom and Dad couldn't get into a full-blown argument right there in the aisle. Dad sat down in his seat, and we went to find ours. The rest of us were all in the same row. Mom, Roderick, and Manny sat on one side of the aisle, and I had the middle seat on the other side. Roderick tried to get me to switch with him so he didn't have to sit by Manny, but I was happy right where I was. I didn't have a whole lot of legroom, but other than that, it wasn't so bad. All the other passengers boarded after us, and people seemed pretty stressed trying to get their stuff into the overhead bins. So I was glad they took my bag at the gate. Everyone put away their bags and sat down in their seats. The pilot made an announcement that the doors were closing, and the seats to my left and right were still empty. I couldn't believe my luck. As soon as we took off, I was gonna stretch out across all 3 seats and get myself a good night's sleep. It was even better than being in first class. But right before the doors closed, one more couple got on board. And they had a baby with them. I didn't think these people would be in my row because there were only 2 empty seats. But the baby sat in his mother's lap. See, if I were in charge of the airline, the rule would be 1 person per seat. Because if this couple had twins, it would have been completely out of hand. I asked these parents if one of them wanted to switch seats with me so they could be next to each other. But the mother said she likes the window, and her husband said he likes to be on the aisle. Right after that, the pilot came on the intercom. He said that before we took off, there'd be a brief safety video to show us what to do in case of an emergency. I was already nervous about flying to begin with, and I didn't like hearing there might be an emergency. So, when the safety video played, I paid attention. But as far as I could tell, I was the only person who did. Everybody else completely tuned out. The beginning of the video was just basic stuff, like how to fasten a seatbelt. But after that, it got serious. The video's narrator said that if there was a loss in cabin pressure, oxygen masks would drop from the ceiling. Well, I don't know what cabin pressure is, but I didn't like hearing that we might lose it. The people in the video didn't look bothered at all when the oxygen masks dropped down, though. In fact, they were all smiling and looked kind of happy about it. Then the video got even worse. The narrator said that in case of a water landing, we'd need to evacuate the plane. Now I was really freaked out. I thought the whole point of an airplane was that it was supposed to stay in the air. The safety video said there were emergency exits on the plane, and the people sitting in the exit rows would need to open the doors so everybody could get out. The emergency exit was 1 row behind me, and I realized the people sitting there weren't paying attention to the video at all. So I snapped my fingers to get them to put down their magazines and listen up. The flight attendants didn't seem bothered that no one was watching the safety video. I figured they probably had their own exits, like a secret door inside the toilet bowl. So if there was any trouble, I was going to follow them. The video showed the plane in the water with inflatable slides coming off the emergency exits. And they actually made it look fun. Whee! Then, the video said our seat cushions doubled as flotation devices, and each one had a whistle attached to it. Now I had questions, so I pressed the button above my seat to get the flight attendant to come over. What I wanted to know was, if we landed in shark-infested waters, would it really be such a good idea to blow the whistle? It felt to me like we'd basically be inviting the sharks over for a free lunch. The flight attendant said I didn't need to worry because all the seat cushions were coated with shark repellent, so they wouldn't even come near us. I was pretty happy to hear that, but now I'm wondering if he was pulling my leg. I don't really get the point of the whistles, though. It's not like anybody's going to hear them if you're in the middle of the ocean. And if you're lucky enough to have a cruise ship pass by, believe me, those guys aren't stopping to pick you up, because they'll be too busy listening to music, drinking champagne, and eating hors d'oeuvres. After the safety video was over, I felt exhausted, and we hadn't even taken off yet. But a few seconds later, the plane started rolling down the tarmac, and the next thing I knew, We were in the air. I'm not gonna lie, I had my eyes shut during the whole takeoff, and I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until I almost passed out. Once we leveled off, the couple sitting in my row started feeding their baby. I was already nauseous from the takeoff, and the smell of mushy peas didn't help things. "Here comes the choo-choo," the dad kept saying. I thought I might actually throw up, but I didn't know what to do. Then I noticed this white paper bag in the seat pocket in front of me with a picture of someone throwing up. And I figured out that's exactly what it's for. The flight attendant already seemed annoyed with me, though, so I knew he wouldn't be too happy if I handed him a bag of vomit. "Here you go." Somehow, I managed to get through the feeding without throwing up. But I wish I could say the same thing for the baby. After the lady cleaned it up, she reached into her bag and gave the baby a couple of toys to play with. One of the toys was a plastic hammer, and as soon as the baby got that thing in its hand, it started pounding on the window. I've heard that if a window on a plane breaks, everything inside gets sucked outside, and that didn't really seem like a good way to go. So when the lady's head was turned, I swiped the hammer from the baby and tucked it under my seat. Unfortunately, that set the baby off. It turns out nobody likes a crying baby on a plane, and everyone started shooting us dirty looks. Luckily, the lady had a bottle in her bag, and that quieted the kid down for a while. I was getting kind of hungry myself, so I pressed the button for the flight attendant and asked when we could expect to get fed. But he said meals were only for first-class passengers, and he tossed me a bag of peanuts to hold me over. That's when I remembered the snacks I'd bought before we got on the plane. But then I remembered that they were in my carry-on bag, which was stowed down below. I guess Mom must have been thinking about food, too, because as soon as the pilot said we had reached our cruising altitude and we were free to move about the cabin, Mom unbuckled her seatbelt and went up to first class with Manny, just in time for dinner. I felt something cold and clammy touch my left elbow, and then something else touched my right one. The guy behind me had taken off his shoes and socks and slid his feet through the spaces between the seats. So I guess this guy decided it was okay to use my armrests as his footrests. I was starting to feel boxed in, and then the person in the seat in front of me tilted his seat all the way back, so it was just a few inches from my face. I tried to tilt my seat back, but I couldn't find the button to do it. So I called the flight attendant and asked him where the button was. But he told me the seats in our row didn't tilt back because they'd block the emergency row. Now I was starting to sweat. I thought I'd read a magazine to take my mind off feeling trapped, but the only thing in the seat pocket was a catalog for all this stuff no one needs. Like pizza blanket. Nighttime cravings? Satisfy them with the pizza blanket. Edible bedding that's warm and tasty. Comes in pepperoni, extra cheese, and anchovies. And snoozos. When you just can't sit through that boring meeting, Snoozo's glasses make you look wide awake, even when you're anything but. And phone bubble. Protect your phone on rainy days with this clear plastic bubble. The people on either